Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. In this video, I'm going to show you how I built my own closet organizer and saved a lot of money doing it. Let's get started. My wife and I recently found out we're expecting our first child, and besides painting and trim work, the first big nursery project was a nice closet organizer. I started by switching out my blade for a 60-tooth ultrafine blade that's recommended for melamine. I chose to use melamine because it's durable, easy to clean, and a full 4x8 sheet is basically the same price if you were to just buy one of these longer shelves at the store. Plus, I didn't have to worry about painting it, which is always a plus. I chose to make my whole unit 15 inches deep, and after I marked it out, I went over my cut line with a strip of tape. This really helps to basically eliminate any ugly tear out in the melamine. Then I lined up my homemade straight line jig and made the cut. This is quite a mess with the circular saw and no dust collection, so definitely make sure you wear a dust mask or do it outside if you can. I'll also mention the only two power tools I used for this whole project were the circular saw and a drill, so you don't need a bunch of expensive tools for this. Here you can see just how crisp of a line you can get with the tape and fine-tooth blade. After that, I just repeated the process 2 more times, again at 15 inches each. Next, I cut the 2 vertical shelf sides to final height, which for my closet I chose 76.5 inches. It would have made more sense to make this cut before I ripped them into 2 pieces, but I just used a clamp to line them up and hold them, and they turned out perfect. These 2 offcuts could be used for 2 of my shelves. Here I'm just cutting the top shelf to length that will reach from wall to wall inside the closet. With all the pieces cut, I started to apply the iron-on edge banding to all of the outside facing edges. This is a really easy process. You just cut the pieces a little longer than needed, and it's a little wider than 3/4 of an inch, so you just line it up so there's an even amount overhanging on both sides. Then I just start on one end with the iron, and you can kind of just feel and see when the glue starts to melt, and then just keep working towards the other end. Before the glue cooled down and dried, I just used a scrap piece of wood to run along the edge and apply pressure. It doesn't take long at all to cool down, and then you can just fold the end back and forth and break them off, and then clean it up with a razor blade. To trim the top and bottom edges flush with the shelf, you can use one of these edge banding trimmers. There's a blade in front that cuts it even with the wood, and a second blade that follows and puts a slight chamfer on it, and it cuts the top and bottom at the same time. I'll also mention I'll have links to all the products you see me using in this video down in the description. On these long pieces, it was really helpful to tape them in place to keep them lined up as I worked down the edge. With all the face edges covered, I could add the adjustable shelf bin holes on each of the vertical shelf sides. I made a mark even on both sides so I could make sure I started at the same spot and the holes would be level. I'm using this jig from Craig, and it made this process really quick and easy. The jig comes with this indexing pin that you just put in your last drilled hole so you can easily make sure you have consistent spacing as you continue down the line. The melamine did slightly chip on some of the holes with the drill bit, but once again the tape did help a lot. On a couple of the shelves, I'm using these cam locks to help solidify everything. The pegs just screw into the holes I already drilled, and then the shelf slides over them and you can tighten the other screw to lock them in place. For the cam locks that I used, I measured 3/8 of an inch from the sides, and then 2 1/16 inch from the front and back of the shelf. Then I used a 3/4 inch Forstner bit to drill the holes where my two marks crossed. Adding tape as a depth stop here really helps. Once it starts to clear away the chips, you know it's time to stop drilling. Once all the holes are drilled, the cam locks can be hammered in place. The last step before assembly was drilling holes for dowels on the top of the vertical shelf sides. I'm using a self-centering dowel jig, and then I'll use dowel center points to find exactly where I need to drill holes on the bottom of the top shelf. Once inside, I screwed a set of the cam lock pegs in where I wanted them. I chose to do a shelf this way on the top and bottom of the unit. Here I'm screwing a cleat to the wall on each end for the top shelf support. I also screwed down through the shelf into this cleat at the end to really make sure it couldn't go anywhere. You can also see I added some clamps on the vertical shelf to help hold everything stable, since I was doing this alone and there wasn't really any structural support at this point. Next I put those dowel center points in to make my marks on the top of the shelf. After I had everything aligned and squared up where I wanted it, I pounded the shelf down to make marks where the holes needed to be drilled. I just used my dowel jig again to make sure I was drilling straight, and a brad point drill bit makes it really easy to line up right in the indentations made by the dowel center points. Then you can see I added regular dowels in the holes and then set the shelf in place. This really helps solidify the whole unit, but it can still be easily removed if needed. One last final check for level before screwing the top shelf down, and it was perfect. Then the rest of the shelves could be added just using these normal shelf pins. The finishing touches were the clothes rods and a new set of doors, and this closet was ready to be filled up for our on-the-way little girl. Alright, thanks for watching. We're really loving how this turned out, and I went with a pretty simple design, but using the techniques that I showed in the video, you can pretty much make it however you want. Do me a favor, please like this video and subscribe. I have a ton of videos coming up this summer. Take care.